Hey, well, thanks, Chris, and thanks, VSAC, for this great initiative, Vermont Applies. Great to be able to do things virtually during the pandemic. So I also want to welcome you to the My Life, My Path workshop. And I'm Tom Cheney, as Chris said, from Advanced Vermont. And our organization is focused on strengthening our communities and economy by ensuring that every Vermonter has a shot at completing education and training after high school. And so today, excited to be with this great group of experts to give you the inside scoop on the many different paths to complete education and training after high school. And the spoiler alert here is it's not just college or bust. There are many really valuable options that we're going to cover in the next hour. So just a couple of housekeeping items. As you'll see, you are all muted, and we encourage you to use the chat for questions throughout the presentation. This session is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the video and the presentations and all the resources discussed today. And they'll also be posted at vsac.org/VermontApplies. So as you also can tell, there is closed captioning for today's workshop. Introduce you to the panel, Maureen Hebert from Vermont Technical College, Martha McCoggan from VSAC, Len Schmidt from the Hannaford Career Center, and Carolyn Weir from the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation. Our host today is Chris, as he said, and Anna Talinsky from VSAC may also jump in from time to time. The two of them will be moderating some of the questions as we go along. We will do questions. Please do put them in the chat as we go, and we will answer them when it makes the most sense, but certainly we'll pause in between each presentation. We will likely not have a lot of time at the end for a round robin of questions, so please keep them coming throughout the webinar. Next. So I first want to start just by saying you are part of something big. The state has set a goal that by 2025, 70% of Vermont workers will have education and training after high school. They actually completed something in training that brings value to them in their careers. And so it's not just a random number. The 70% is based on the needs of employers. And really simply put, then they need the skills that are developed only if you continue your learning after high school. And as you continue your next steps after high school, just consider that you are going to enter Vermont's workforce, and you'll be powering our state, you'll be powering our economy, and really our collective success as a state. Next slide. And so, that's great. We all like to have value in our communities and in our state, and that's important. But it's also really important for us to consider what we need, what's important to us as individuals. And so I suspect most of you know this is why you are here, but it's worth noting why education and training is just so important. It creates more job opportunities. It makes more money, and you get to invest in yourself and really pursue your dreams and define your own success. And I would note that as I was thinking about this, that's not any right particular order. Jobs, money, yourself. It can be any particular order, and there are many other reasons why you may want education and training after high school. But one thing is true, is that 100% of Vermont's high pay, high demand jobs in the state require education and training after high school. And Carolyn will talk more about that in a little bit. And we're just over 50% of Vermonters actually have completed education and training after high school. So we've got some work to do. Next. So you get to define your own success. There's no right way to approach your life. There's no right way to approach your education and career. There's a lot of noise out there. A parent, grandparent, teacher, mentor, they may tell you what they think you should be or what you should do after high school. And look, they might be right. I mean, they may have a pretty good handle on it, but they might not. So it's important to listen. But the bottom line is that in order to be successful, you really have to buy into your path. You've got to buy into your own future and what that means for you. And you've got to take charge. It's not easy. It requires research. It requires asking a lot of questions of yourself and plenty of other people. and it requires you to put yourself out there. But the great thing is that you've got options. And so that's really what the essence of this presentation is about today. Next. So what are the options? We're going to dive into these very deeply in just a little while, but the starting point is you got to finish high school. And that may be getting your diploma, or that may be getting your GED. And after that, you have some choices. You can get a certificate. You can get a registered apprenticeship. You can pursue an associate's degree or bachelor's degree. And they have various different requirements, various different lengths, and different costs. And you can see with this graphic that goes from just a few months for a certificate program to a short amount of time for a registered apprenticeship. A couple years for an associate's degree, and a bachelor's degree is about 4 years if you're going full time for those two, and different costs associated with each. Next slide. There's also no reason why you can't just do a few of them. We know that our paths can be windy. That's really okay. In fact, it's becoming more and more of the norm. More than ever, workers really are continuing to build their skills and their credentials throughout their careers. And I'm going to take a moment just to define credentials. That's a bucket term that we use to talk about any education path after high school. So it encompasses college, apprenticeships, certificates, etc. And really what a credential does is it helps you build your skills that can be verified when you get into the workforce. These are things, it's basically a piece of paper that says to an employer, I'm ready. And it doesn't really matter how big that piece of paper is, exactly what it says. If you earn a credential, and a credential of value, they sometimes call it, you do have value to your employers. So in this case, Finley works in computer science and wants to be a computer developer. So they started with a computer science certification, then got a bachelor's. On the other side, you'll see they got a couple other certificates on the way that have value in the marketplace. And they add skills for their day-to-day work, and then also resume value. So we call this stacking. Next. So before I hand it off, I just want to say, for starters, dive deeper into what I just told you with the My Life, My Path resource at advancedvermont.org/pathways. There you'll find a lot of what I just talked about, but in greater detail, with more information about the different education and training programs that you can pursue. There's also, I see a few school counselors and other folks who work with students. There's a Navigator toolkit there. So there's a toolkit for you to use with your students that has some best practices and some tips and some resources. So as we go along today, I just encourage you to jot down during the presentation what makes you excited. What do you think might be a good next step for you? And then circle it and explore it later. And then make a plan to visit one of the websites referenced or connect with somebody that has been highlighted, or an organization that's been highlighted throughout the presentation. Again, research and reach out. So the final thing I'm going to mention before I hand it off is coming in 2021 is Advanced Vermont's My Future VT. And this will be a one-stop shop for education and career resources in the state. So we certainly are building it for you so that you can go and learn about the high pay, high demand jobs in the state, the programs in Vermont that will lead to these jobs, and then finally a whole smattering of resources for you to look at so that you can get a better handle on how to kind of go through the process from high school to your post-secondary education and training, and then on to career. So with that, if there's no questions, I'm going to hand it over to Carolyn Weir. Carolyn is the executive director at the McClure Foundation and is going to talk to us a little bit more about those high pay, high demand careers that are waiting for you. So Carolyn.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here today. This session overviews, as Tom said, right, a range of education and training options after high school that lead to good jobs, right? And walks through the support available to help pay for them. So I was thinking we could start at the end point, the good job, and talk about what good jobs will be in Vermont when you graduate and in the years that follow. I'm going to talk about some of the especially promising jobs that exist now and into the future and help tee up the rest of today's conversation about the range of affordable education and training options that lead to them and the supports available for accessing and affording those programs. Figuring out what Vermont's good jobs are is a part of my work with the McClure Foundation. This fall, we released an updated list of Vermont's most promising jobs for the next 10 years in partnership with the Vermont Department of Labor. Each job on this list pays an average of at least $22 an hour and is projected to have at least 220 openings in the years to come. What's immediately clear in looking at the list of jobs is that there's a huge diversity of jobs available now and into the future in fields ranging from construction and finance to healthcare to business services, really, you name it. I think you'll find there's a good fit out there for everyone. I want to zoom through just a few of these jobs now really quickly. So first up, licensed practical nurse, you might know it as LPN. This is a job you can access after completing a certificate program at Vermont Tech that prepares you for licensure and puts you on a path to even higher wages down the road as a registered nurse with more education. What comes to mind for me when I think about this career path, especially in a pandemic, is that your work each day helps keep your community safe, your neighbors healthy and cared for, and that's essential work. It's specialized work, it's important work. Next up, computer support specialist. Great. This is a great job for problem solvers, for those who like working with people. It's a job that plays a really critical function within companies or within IT consultant firms. And the Community College of Vermont offers a short-term career training program called the IT Service Desk Specialist program that can prepare you for this job. Next up is electricians. There's a registered apprenticeship program at Vermont Tech offered in partnership with the Vermont Department of Labor that allows you to earn while you learn, right? Working and earning wages during the day while taking courses occasionally in the evenings. Something that draws some folks to this field is that many jobs connect to the green economy and to cutting edge renewable energies, which is really exciting. And next up, last but not least, you might have heard the fact that something like 80% of people say that they are worse at math than the average person, which is of course a statistical impossibility. I would definitely put myself in the category of being worse than average at math, but I think I would love this job of bookkeeper, because it's a good fit for people who are detail oriented and can use a calculator. The bookkeeping certificate at the Community College of Vermont, which folks can complete in as little as 1 year, leads directly to a promising job as a bookkeeper, either at a company or working for yourself. Bookkeepers who complete the program can apply those credits toward an accounting degree down the road and become a certified public accountant. Accountants and auditors are one of the most promising jobs that we feature in our updated list, and they earn an average of almost $70,000 a year in Vermont. So there are over 60 other jobs on this list. And truly it is not an endpoint, right? There is a huge, huge diversity of high pay, high demand, exciting jobs available in Vermont now and into the future. And for those who are curious, pharmacist is the job that pays a median wage of $140,000 a year. Next. So this is a snapshot of the list of those 60 jobs. You're not expected to be able to see this or read it on the screen, but I wanted you to see that they're categorized by career interest type. For example, jobs for people who like working with their hands or with machines to make or fix or build things. Jobs that might be a good fit for people who are organized and detail oriented and like to work with lots of information. Or jobs for people who like to work with other people and use their creativity to guide or inform or teach or persuade. Your sense of what kind of work environment and what kind of work tasks make you feel energized can help you narrow in on some career paths that are good fits with your interests and skills and goals. Next. And this is what the brochure looks like. We have printed copies available, and anyone can order as many free copies as they like anytime on our website. You can see the URL on your screen. Next. So these questions are worth spending some time with by yourself or with your school counselor, your advisor, your parents, your friends, your coach, the super-time job. They're important because choosing a career path, choosing what you want to do for work as an adult is a really personal decision, right? It takes into account how you want to spend your days, how you want to impact your community, the ways in which you want to be able to support yourself, your family, maybe your future family, the skills you want to learn. We hope this list of Vermont's most promising jobs can be a guiding tool, maybe a conversation starter, because your answers to those first two questions will help you figure out the answer for the third. And there are a lot of people in your life who can help you find the right next step for you. Now, the majority of the promising jobs on the list require some form of education or training after high school. Some of them require a lot of education after high school, but not all. You might have noticed that all of the programs that lead to the jobs that I mentioned earlier on are at colleges, Vermont Tech and the Community College of Vermont specifically, but the programs I mentioned weren't degree programs. These colleges offer many short-term career training programs, and in many of those programs, the credits you get through the courses that you take count toward a degree later on if you ever want to go back to school. Next.
Carolyn, real quick, we had a question pop up, if I may.
Yeah.
And let me know if you'll get to this or not, but does on your website, does the McClure Foundation note the linkages between the programs at CCV and VT in Vermont Tech with these jobs that you've outlined?
That's a great question. When we get to the short-term career training programs we consider best bets, the answer is yes. For the rest of the education and training programs based in Vermont that lead to the 60+ jobs that we consider particularly promising, that's where we are looking to Tom's team's work with the My Future VT portal coming live in early 2021, which he mentioned earlier in this panel.
Thank you.
Great, Chris. So if you want to take us, great. So this next slide, I just wanted to quickly mention the 7 short-term career training programs that we at the McClure Foundation consider best bets for landing a promising job quickly. These 7 short-term career training programs stood out to us because they're affordable, they're short, they are easily accessible no matter what part of the state you live in, and they reliably lead to a promising job on a career pathway with even higher pay down the road. And of course, they're all offered by the Community College of Vermont or Vermont Tech. As you can see, or maybe not quite as well as you'd want to on this slide, the programs themselves represent some exciting and critical career fields. We've got healthcare, manufacturing, finance, IT, computer programming, marketing. And more exciting, grants from the Vermont Community Foundation's Vermont COVID-19 Response Fund will help reduce tuition for these 7 programs for over 250 Vermonters next year, including folks just coming out of high school. You can learn more by reaching out to CCV or Vermont Tech or VSAC. We think these programs are some great places to start for people looking to land a promising job quickly, but it is really just a starting point. There are lots of great education and training programs out there that lead to good jobs and lots of support to access and afford them. That's what you'll hear more from Len. But before I hand it off, Chris, did I see another question come through?
There was one that came through, but Tom's going to take that with the transition.
Excellent. Tom, back to you.
Yeah, there was a muting issue. I couldn't unmute myself. So here we are. Challenges with technology always. Thank you so much, Carolyn. That was great. And to answer your question, Heather, yes, this webinar will be shared with you following conclusion, and you will absolutely be able, and we encourage you to share it with students, coworkers, really anybody. It'd be a great Friday evening date night, I might say. Um, that's a joke. So moving on to Len here. So one thing I just wanted to note is we're going to start moving into talking a little bit more about the specific education and training pathways that are out there in Vermont and really anywhere. And one thing I did want to note is that you don't have to wait until after high school to start pursuing some of these pathways and some of these credentials. There's dual enrollment, early college, the fast forward program through your CTE center, or simply just going to a regional CTE program. Many of them offer credentials, different types, often multiple. So I would say, please do start your pathway now if you have an understanding of where you'd like to go and what you'd like to do. And there are resources available to you to begin pursuing those credentials and get a little bit of a head start. So I want to hand it over to Len, who is the adult CTE director, among many other things at the Hannaford Career Center in Middlebury. Len.
Thank you, Tom. And thanks for backing up there a little bit. I think when you mentioned that, you know, all of these things require you to have a high school diploma, we certainly don't want anybody leaving high school in order to just go into the workplace. But great point. You can start earning certificates and credentials at a tech center while you're still in high school. And we'll take a little bit more look at that later. I'm also working part-time for the Vermont Adult Career and Technical Education Association. So all the tech centers in the state also have adult education programs. So if you're not in a high school tech center program, you can always come back as an adult and take classes to earn certificates and licenses at that point in your career. Next. Next slide. So a certificate, broadly speaking, is just a document attesting to certain facts, but in the world of education and training, it usually means something that is more training than a high school diploma, but less than a 2-year college degree, and it focuses on specific skills. Lots of times the certificate training can be very hands-on because it's those skills that you're focused on learning. They're offered at colleges, at universities, at CTE centers, and at private providers around the state as well. Relatively low cost, even if you're not getting financial aid, they're pretty affordable. Next. Next.
Seems like there's a little bit of a lag with this here. There we go.
So I'm not going to go through all the certificates. There are so many out there, but I want to just give you a sense of how broad the range is. Phlebotomy technician is in the health field. Nora Bronze is a skilled trade associated with plumbing. Certified public bookkeeping, which Carolyn mentioned earlier. ServSafe is a restaurant certification. Certified production technician is common manufacturing certificate. Automotive service excellence might be the one that you're most familiar with, seeing at garages and service centers. Web design in the graphic arts world, and a welding society. All of those are examples of different sectors, different types of certificates that are available. Next. So just to dive into one of those a little bit closer, a phlebotomy technician certification. It's available through most of the adult CTE programs around the state. There's 17 locations, and I believe 8 of them offer phlebotomy technician certification. It's also available through VTC, Vermont High Tech, UVM, and some private providers. The programs vary between 45 and 80 hours in length. If that's the only certificate you get, the median wage for a phlebotomist is about $17 an hour. But as we're going to look at a little bit more, many of these certifications are stackable. You add them to other trainings that you may have, and they increase your employability, your skill set, the variety of work that you can perform, which always makes it more enjoyable, and also just your broadens your understanding of the field that you're working in. Next. Another certificate that's often stackable is a NORA bronze certification. This is a plumbing and heating certification for working on oil boilers. Lots of times this can be stacked with propane or natural gas certifications if you're in the plumbing field, but you could also perhaps stack a NORA bronze certification with a CDL license. That's very common among people that drive fuel delivery trucks. If somebody's furnace goes out in the middle of winter and they believe they're out of oil, if that oil truck driver can also restart or perform routine maintenance on the furnace, that's a huge plus. So that's an example of how certificates can be stacked. Next. So licenses. License is permission to do something from an authority or government. Primarily, we're talking about licenses that are granted by the state of Vermont. Many of the things that we've already mentioned, such as being an RN or an LPN, are essentially licenses. You complete a training program and you may be required to pass both a written and a practical exam, and then you are able to earn that license. In general, licenses increase your earning power over somebody with a similar skill set doing a similar job who doesn't have a license. Just as an example, installing photoelectric panels is fairly similar job to being an electrician, but it's unlicensed. So an electrician is going to make quite a bit more an hour than a solar panel installer is. Similarly, if you have a teaching license, it enables you to get jobs that pay more than if you're an unlicensed teacher. So oftentimes a certification or some kind of training is required to even sit for the exam. You can't just walk in off the street and take a nursing exam. You have to have completed a training program. And then licenses often require action to maintain your license, whether that's professional development and continued training, or if there may be drug testing requirements, or any number of things that may be required to maintain a license. Next. So a couple of examples of licenses, again, across a broad range of sectors. CDL is essentially a driver's license. That's probably what we're most familiar with. There's a variety of nursing licenses and other health licenses, electrical and plumbing or skilled trade licenses. And then there's also things as far ranging as being a cosmetologist, a tattooist, or a public school teacher. Next. So taking a look at a couple of these, a commercial driver's license, there are several of them available. Class A license is the over-the-road tractor trailer drivers. You do have to be 21 to drive out of state. So this is maybe more of a long-term goal for many folks. Class B license is for driving smaller delivery trucks that don't have a trailer behind them. There are 280 openings per year for the next 10 years anticipated in the state of Vermont for CDL drivers. It's also, again, a stackable credential so that you can add in tanker endorsements or passenger endorsements, or in the NORA bronze to become a fuel truck delivery driver, or hazmat endorsements. There are all kinds of stackable credentials associated with a commercial driver's license. Next. A registered nurse. So this is something we're going to take a look a little bit more at later on. It's available through Vermont Tech, Norwich, UVM, and Castleton in Vermont. They're basically two different programs, a 24-month associate's degree RN program, or a 48-month bachelor's degree program. Median wage is $32 an hour and 430 openings per year for the next 10 years. Quite a big demand for RNs. Next. So the focus today is looking at building your own path, whether it's in career or education. So let's take a little bit closer look at what that might look like if you're interested in nursing. Next. So kind of the traditional old school story, often what very traditional guidance counselors at a high school might be telling you is to become an RN, you go to a four-year college, you get a Bachelor of Science of Nursing, and you become an RN. It's a very simple path. It is a relatively expensive one. You can end up oh, anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 in debt at the age of 22 to pay for this. But it's probably the fastest way to the highest paying position as a nurse. Next. So if you're looking for, if that isn't quite right for you for any number of reasons, you can go to get a high school diploma, get a 1-year LPN certification, and start work as an LPN. It doesn't pay quite as much as an RN, but you would get there sooner. You'd be getting your feet wet, learning if this career is really a match for you or not. And then you could go back to school, do a 1-year practical nurse to registered nurse program, and end up with an RN through a slightly different route. It would get you into the workplace sooner. You'd be earning money sooner. You'd be finding out if the career is really a match for you or not. Next. So that's not it. There's more options out there available. You could get a high school diploma, go through a 10-week training program, and come out of that with an LNA and start work as a nurse assistant in a medical facility. You can earn your LPN while you're working. Many medical centers offer partial or complete tuition reimbursement so that your LPN certification wouldn't cost you anything. You'd have the support and the familiarity of being in the workplace already. And some programs, some employers will even pay for your classroom, pay your wages for your classroom time while you're earning your LPN. And then again, you can go through a PN to RN program, again, perhaps paid by your employer because you're already in the workforce, and end up with your RN at considerably less expense to yourself. Might take a little bit longer, but you've also had a lot of work experience to build your skills and make you more successful along the way. Next. So that's not it. Here's another option. You could go through an LNA program at a tech center while you're in school, come out of that program with um, a LPN certificate, or excuse me, come out of that program with an LNA, go right into the workforce at graduation and earn your LPN while you're working. Again, do a 1-year PN to RN and get your RN that way. Next. Or perhaps you are totally dialed into the RN. You know that's what you want to do. You want to start that while you're still in high school. You can go to a tech center, get your LNA and up to 8 college credits through dual enrollment programs, through many of the medical professions programs at tech centers. Coming out with those extra credits in high school, you could do a 4-year college program in 3.5 years. Next. And you could just keep going and going. There are so many different paths to get to that RN. I really encourage you to think about what works best for you, what your goals are. And then I think either Chris or Carolyn mentioned earlier the idea of research and then reach out. Would be great to learn more about what works for you and then reach out to many of the resources you're hearing about today for more information. And that's back to you, Tom or Maureen.
Great. And Len, you had this last slide that I think covers some of that information. So I think you may have just mentioned that. So take a look at those links when we send you the slides later on. So next we're going to hand it over, and thanks so much, Len, to Maureen Hebert, who is the Associate Dean at Vermont Technical College. And Maureen's going to talk to us about apprenticeships. So without further ado, Maureen.
So thanks, Tom. This is something near and dear to my heart, so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. If we could go to the next slide, please. So back in the day, before there were high schools, before there were colleges, before there was any kind of formal learning opportunities, there were apprenticeship programs. So in order to become skilled at a particular essential skill, you had to become an apprentice to master. If any of you have watched Forge and Fire, to become a skilled swordsmith, you would have had to have gone through this program. And over the years, obviously, the opportunities and career paths have changed. But what's pretty exciting about this opportunity is that you're basically learning while you are earning. So next slide, please. So basically an apprenticeship program combines classroom training, which is typically at a college, or in some cases with pre-apprenticeship programs at a CTE. And then you also learn on-the-job skills. So you work with a mentor who teaches you the practical use of what you've learned in your classroom. So for every 4 hours of on-the-job training, you get 1 hour of related instruction in the classroom. Next slide, please. And next slide, please, we can go past this. So, and in the reverse, basically, the on-the-job training is with an employer. The employer is your sponsor. The employer is paying you a wage while you're going through this process. At the state of Vermont, the Department of Labor is the coordinator for all apprenticeship programs, but typically these courses are run at a college. So in the state of Vermont, this is CCV and Vermont Tech. We currently have 800 apprenticeship students in programs across the state. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. What this does is it basically gets you to the point where you get journey level status. And this is a nationally recognized credential. It also leads in some cases to licensure, as Len was talking about. And it also includes, in some cases, industry recognized credentials that all can feed into college level courses if you decide to go on to a program. And again, these are federally recognized and nationally recognized credentials. So on the side here, you see some of examples. We have construction, manufacturing, and healthcare. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, learning while earning. So you're actually getting paid to take courses. Your employer is typically paying the tuition or program fee for you to participate. So you basically finish a program without any debt. It's an alternative path to the job market and career opportunities. And I mentioned there are thousands of apprenticeship programs. What's pretty exciting in the state of Vermont is we've had a long-term experience with electrical and plumbing, but we've added many new programs over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. The thousands of possibilities are, as we've talked about some of them before, LPN is an apprenticeship program. We also have a paramedicine program, phlebotomy, LNA programs. In manufacturing, which I'll get into a more detailed example in a few moments. Business, we talked about bookkeeping. CCV is now offering a bookkeeping apprenticeship program. Electrical and plumbing, we have 700 students that are taking these courses statewide. And their employer partners are up past 100 partners that we have at this point. You can also be a ski lift repairer. So all of the ski resorts in the state have a tramway apprenticeship program. There are childcare programs, solar installer. There are several other renewable energy apprenticeship programs as well. IT, Could become a beer brewer. There are so many choices, and there are many more that are being added regularly. We just talked about adding a new woodworking program in the state, so that's coming soon. We also have a teacher licensure program that we offer at Vermont Tech. Next slide, please. So here's an example of an advanced manufacturing apprenticeship program. We have a lot of students that are coming right out of high school and are jumping into this program. They take the courses at Vermont Tech. They have a mentor at their employer, and the employer pays for the program. They do typically about 2,000 hours of on-the-job training, and it varies depending on the employer partner. But then they have the option to get a degree program. So in the case of the program we're currently doing with Global Foundries is actually paying for the participants to get their associate's degree. So in this scenario, they complete their apprenticeship program. They can jump into the GET, which is the General Engineering Technology degree, mechanical engineering, and then can go on to our manufacturing and engineering technology bachelor's degree program. Next slide, please. So basically, what is an apprenticeship program? It's just a different way of offering the curriculum, but it's more affordable, cost effective. You have an employer that you're working with. It's a set of skills and competencies that the employer is looking for. And then they're also giving you the opportunity to learn more about their organization through the on-the-job training program. Next slide, please. And it really is a partnership. The employer is a critical piece in this, but the apprenticeship student has to also be committed to the program. So they work for a tiered pay. When you start, you make a little bit less, and as you progress through the program, they increase your wages. The focus really as an apprentice student is really to focus on that learning, attend class, meet certain expectations within the course, meet the learning criteria and the competencies, and earn those credits so you can continue and move on. And again, the employer will give you release time, they'll support you as a mentor, and they'll pay you wages as you progress through. Next slide, please. So here are some additional resources, but again, really the sky's the limit in the state of Vermont. There's so many choices, so many options. If we don't have an apprenticeship program, we can actually create one if we have enough employer partners. The solar array that you see right here, this is a new program that we're starting at Vermont Tech in the next year or so. And I continue to add new programs regularly. So it's a really great opportunity to learn, earn, get a career path that pays you very well, as we saw the wages earlier on. And it also allows you to not accumulate a debt as you would maybe through a traditional path. So it's very cost effective. So thank you all for your attention.
Great. Thanks so much, Maureen. I don't see any questions. Feel free to ask them as we go about apprenticeships if one comes to mind. I'm going to hand it right over to Martha McCoggan, who is an outreach counselor in VSAC's Education Opportunity Center. And she's going to talk a little bit about how to pay for education and training after high school, and then who can help. So Martha.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me today. This is just such a great topic, I think. So I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the funding options available for a lot of the different kinds of training that have been talked about today. But before I do that, I just want to really emphasize some of other people have touched on this, but what you do between now and high school graduation is really up to you. And what you do after high school graduation is up to you. I would just encourage you to sort of take ownership of finding out the information you need to pursue any idea or possibility that you're thinking about. And so that when you get done with high school, whatever you decide to do, to be intentional about it, that it's a decision and you're sort of not just letting it happen. Next slide. So this is somewhat of a repeat of what Tom talked about. There's lots of good reasons to go on for further training after high school. And statistics definitely show that the more education someone has over your lifetime, the more income you'll make. And there's, great benefits that can become available as you take on more and more schooling. When I get to the next few slides about the funding, I think one of the things I found in my work with Vermonters is sometimes people are wary about jumping into a training program, partly because of the money. And one thing I'd like to emphasize here is you can apply for financial aid and it doesn't hold you to anything. It's not committing you to actually register and take the class. It's a great way to find out, and it makes it a lot easier, I think, if you find out, oh my goodness, I can have maybe 80% of a program covered by grant money or some other scholarship, that it's not going to cost you that much out of your own pocket. That can make it a lot easier to take that step. I can't begin to tell you how many people that I've helped, and they'll look across the desk at me and say, back when I could meet in person, and they'll say, I had no idea that there was this kind of help out there. If I had known this, I would have started this a long time ago. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to give a brief overview of some different financial aid pots of money and options for folks. Typically, financial aid can be divvied up into 4 different kinds of money. Grant money that can come from the federal government, it can come from the state government, and it, in some cases, can come from the school or college. Grants are financial aid that is determined mostly by the family's income situation. So if you're concerned that you come from a family that doesn't have a lot of financial resources, you might be really surprised to find out that because of that, you may end up with a lot of financial aid in the form of a grant. And grants do not need to be paid back. So generally speaking, the lower the family income, the more access to grant funding. There are also scholarships available, and for college anyway, a lot of those scholarships, the difference between a grant and a scholarship is that they're competitive. There will be a pot of money and only so much money, so other people will be competing for those dollars. You might have to write an essay. It might have to do with the kind of area you're choosing to train in. It may have to do with your academic ability, but there's lots of different kinds of scholarships. Work study is a kind of financial aid that you work for, you earn it. If you're on a college campus, you can get a job and you work throughout the year part-time, and you can use that money any way you want to help cover the cost of your schooling. And then there's also federal student loan money. And often people do need to borrow some, but I like to talk about it in the sense that it's a good investment if you need to borrow. The way that you apply for this kind of money is there's a federal form called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That application is the doorway into financial aid for college students. You can't get any aid unless you fill that out. And that application is going to determine how much your family needs to contribute towards your education. So a lower dollar figure means more access to grant money because the family income is such that you can't afford to contribute as much as a family with more resources. And in Vermont, we also have funding through VSAC, through the state tax dollars that VSAC administers. There's a Vermont grant application. And I just quickly want to note that you can take into account special circumstances. So if something has happened in your family where a parent has lost a job and income one year is less than the year that the financial aid is determined by, you can always ask colleges and you can ask VSAC to look at special circumstances. Okay, next slide. So these funding sources that I'm going to talk about here tend to be those that are used more for a lot of the kinds of short-term trainings that people have been talking about today. There's the advancement grant, the Curtis Training Scholarship, and a CTE Adult Training Scholarship. And I'm going to go into those with a little more detail in the following slides, but I did want to mention that at the Department of Labor, they have funding for training. It's called WIOA, W-I-O-A, and some of those dollars are used for adults who want to go back to school and take coursework so they can get back out into the job market. But there's a program for youth, and it's designed to help with employment and training services for anyone between the ages of 14 and 24. If you are involved in the WIOA youth program, you would have a counselor. That person would work with you as you transition through high school and out of high school. And then also vocational rehabilitation. Also, there are counselors that work with students in high school and help again with that transition. And they do have some money available to help with the cost of books, some short-term training, and other kinds of supports. Next slide.
Thank you, Martha. And as we get into the next topic, if you're able to, we had a question come through the chat regarding typical income ranges with grants. If there's any way that maybe you could touch upon that as well.
So the advancement grant is sort of I just think this is a wonderful program that VSAC has. It used to be called the non-degree program. If some of you are familiar with that, as of July 1st, the name officially changed to the advancement grant. So this is designed for anyone who's out of high school. Although if you're a senior and you want to take a short-term training program that begins after you graduate, you can apply for the program while you're in high school, but you have to be out of high school to be eligible for this money. And as a Vermonter, if you're eligible, you can get up to 6 of these advancement grants in your lifetime. And every year, there's a possibility of up to $3,000 in advancement grant funding that you can use toward the cost of a course or a program. It's a bit tricky to talk about the income ranges because VSAC takes into account family income, family size, if there are assets or not. Also the cost of the course, a CDL Class A course that costs $55 or $600 is pretty expensive, and family income could be higher and you could have some eligibility because of the cost of the course, where maybe if it was only a $400 course, the family might not be eligible. Like with anything, applying is the best way to find out about eligibility. Next slide, Chris. So this program, the Curtis COV Training Scholarship, COV stands for Certificate of Value. This is, I think that we're in our 3rd year now with this training scholarship, and it's been really wonderful. In order to be eligible for this program, the scholarship, you do have to have some eligibility for a Vermont grant, even if it's only $50. If you apply to, say, for a phlebotomy class and the cost is $1,900 and your advancement grant eligibility was $400, you could be nominated for this Curtis Training Scholarship to make up the difference. The range can be from $500 of unmet need up to a maximum of $1,500. And in a way, what you're finding as I talk through these programs is that as credentials are stackable, financial aid is a bit stackable as well. That's probably not the precise word, but in my work, I do a lot of piecing together. I can help somebody with an advancement grant and I might refer over to a WIOA case manager because they could maybe make up the difference. So this also, just to emphasize, this scholarship is specifically to be used for programs that lead to some kind of licensure, some kind of certification where the person will be able to go out and get a good paying job with a livable wage, like those best bets that Carolyn was talking about. Next slide, Chris. And this scholarship, the CTE Adult Training Scholarship, and CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. This is for use at a technical center. And it's brand new, hot off the press. This just began this year. And currently the funding is through the end of June of 2021. I'm assuming, I don't know this, but I'm assuming that if it's a successful year, that this will happen again in the future for other years. One thing that's nice about this program is you have to apply for advancement grant funding, and you have to find out if you're eligible for funding through the WIOA program at the Department of Labor. But if you're not eligible for any of that money, you can still be nominated for this CTE scholarship. So whereas the Curtis scholarship requires some indication of need based on eligibility for a Vermont grant, that's not the case with the CTE training scholarship. And it can contribute toward a class or a program at one of the tech centers up to a maximum of $1,000.
We had a quick question come through, if I may, real quick, Martha. The Curtis grant, is that one available for high school students?
And Martha,
It is
before
not.
you answer that, I just want to say we also have just a couple minutes left. So just want to give you a time check.
Okay, it's not eligible for high school students. So next slide, Chris. So the next few slides, and I don't really have time to go through them all. It's just giving you some resources to hopefully use. These are searchable items on VSAC's website. I'd love to have you go look at informational interviewing and job shadowing. That's a great way to get information and make connections with people doing the work you're considering doing. Next slide, Chris. And these are some more websites that are great resources for you to look into. Next slide. These are all things that you should be able to access through your high school guidance office. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of them. And that's it was already mentioned earlier, but a great way to see if college is for you is to take a class while you're in high school. And the dual enrollment program will pay for those classes for you. And then there's also the early college program where you can spend your senior year at a college and have a year's worth of college credit when you graduate from high school. Next, Chris. And this is just information about the work I do and a phone number if you wanted to schedule an appointment with me or one of my colleagues. There are outreach programs that work with students in high school. The program I work for, this Educational Opportunity Center, we can only work with seniors that are about ready to, launch from high school. But if anyone wants help with any of this stuff, I'd be happy to, my colleagues and I would be happy to meet with you. And the last slide, Chris. So just a few more thoughts, and again, wanting to emphasize that there's no one right way to go through life. There's no one right way to approach your education after high school. But I would strongly encourage you to be thoughtful about it. Get yourself some kind of journal, whether it's online or paper. Imagine possibilities. Don't limit yourself. Write things down. Search for information, ask questions, ask for help, and take charge of your life. And really try to have fun with this. This is your life, and there's so many more options available today than when I was younger. So I'm sorry to go through all that so quickly, but we've run out of time.
Well, thanks, Martha. You did a great job, and I think covered it all in such a great way. And just to emphasize as we close, There are so many resources available for you to pursue and explore your education and training after high school, but there's no question you have to continue. You have to go back and continue to learn throughout the rest of your life. It'll bring you value as an individual and bring you value to your family and bring value to your career. So use your resources, whether it's VSAC, the My Life, My Path, My Future VT, which again is coming later this winter. And then most importantly, really find connections, whether it's the job shadow that Martha mentioned, a school counselor, a teacher, a coach, and an employer, or, of course, your family and your friends. So don't forget that may be just as important as anything else we've talked about today. And ask those questions because people are there to listen and to help. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing from you. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. You can see some of our contact information right here, and we'll be happy to connect you with the right folks to answer any of your questions. So thanks so much for coming and have a great rest of the day.